It lasted just 90 seconds. A masked figure hijacked live television. No warning. No explanation. And then he vanished. Who was he? And how did he take over an entire city's broadcast? In November 1987, something unprecedented happened in Chicago. Two major television stations were interrupted. Not by a government. Not by a corporation. But by an unknown intruder. What followed was bizarre. Disturbing. Almost surreal. A performance that made no sense. But proved something dangerous. This is the story of the most infamous broadcast hijacking in history. It began at 9:14 p.m. A routine sports segment on Chicago's WGN TV. Everything was normal. Predictable. Then suddenly, the signal failed. No transition. No warning. Just silence. And interference. For 25 seconds, viewers saw something impossible. A man, wearing a rubber mask, swaying silently in front of a moving metal background. No voice. No explanation. Just movement. Unnatural. Deliberate. Unsettling. People at home froze. Some thought it was a joke.
Behold the light that reveals all shadows.
Others thought their TVs were broken. Inside the station, engineers scrambled. But before anyone could react, it ended. The broadcast snapped back, as if nothing had happened. Engineers were confused. They assumed it was a technical glitch. A signal error. A minor disruption. But they were wrong. It wasn't a glitch. 2 hours later, it happened again. But this time, it was worse. At 11:15 p.m., during a late-night broadcast, the signal was hijacked again. But now, it lasted longer. And this time, he spoke. The same masked figure returned. But everything about it felt different. More chaotic. More aggressive. The intruder delivered a distorted, surreal monologue. His voice was warped. Unstable. Almost mechanical. He made strange references. To television. To corporations. To things no one fully understood. Inside jokes. Obscure comments. Things that felt targeted, but made no sense to the public. He waved objects at the camera. Mocked television personalities. Moved unpredictably. At times, it felt like performance art. At others, something much stranger. And then, things escalated. In one moment, he was spanked with a fly swatter. It was absurd, almost ridiculous, but also deeply unsettling, because behind the chaos, there was control. Every movement, every second, felt intentional. This wasn't random. It was planned, carefully, precisely. To understand what happened, you have to understand how television worked in 1987. This was before the internet. Before digital broadcasting. Television signals were physical. They traveled through the air, using microwave transmissions. From the studio to a transmission tower, then broadcast across the city. It was a chain. And like any chain, it had a weak point. If someone could intercept that signal and overpower it, they could replace it completely. But this wasn't easy. It required precision, timing, and serious equipment. Not something you could do by accident. You would need a transmitter, powerful enough to override a broadcast signal. You would need to be positioned correctly, within direct line of sight of the tower. And you would need to act at exactly the right moment. Even a small mistake would fail instantly. Which meant one thing: whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't just a prank. It was a demonstration. Within hours, authorities were involved. The FCC launched an investigation. The FBI followed. This wasn't just strange. It was serious. Because if someone could hijack a signal like this, they could hijack anything. Emergency broadcasts, news systems, public alerts. But investigators had a problem. There was nothing to trace. No fingerprints. No digital records. No witnesses. Only a signal that had already disappeared. Engineers began analyzing what little they had, trying to reconstruct the intrusion. They believed the hijacker used a high-powered transmitter, positioned somewhere near the broadcast towers, possibly from a rooftop or an elevated structure. But Chicago was a large city, dense, complex, and by the time the investigation began, the intruder was already gone. The signal had vanished, without a trace. Despite national attention, despite media coverage, no one was ever caught. The incident shocked broadcasters across the country. It wasn't just bizarre. It was a warning. If one person could hijack a signal in Chicago, it could happen anywhere. Television networks began to panic. Stations started upgrading their systems. Security protocols tightened. Signal encryption improved. Monitoring systems became more advanced. Layers of protection were added. Redundancies, backups, fail-safes. But the damage was already done. Because something had changed. Something fundamental. The illusion of control was broken. People realized these systems weren't as secure as they seemed.